Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Femme Portfolio podcast. I'm your co-host, Bryn Bradshaw Mack.
And I'm Rachel Hirsch.
And today we have on the lovely Julia O'Mara, co-founder of Pickle, an app for sustainable fashion, so fashion rental, and recently a New York City storefront. So, Julia, will
So
you
cool.
by telling us a bit about you and the founding of Pickle?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here and talk all about Pickle. So my background, a bit non-traditional for getting to where we are today with Pickle. I'll start from college. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I studied engineering there. I also played lacrosse, so had a ton of free time, but ended up heavy pivoting away from kind of the engineering realm. It was actually material science engineering and had a big interest in finding the cross between tech and business or tech and finances end up where I went. So I graduated in 2019. I moved right to New York City and I started working at Blackstone for almost 2 years, which is where I met my co-founder, Brian McMahon. We were working there with the IR and fundraising teams, more on the product management and data analytics side of things. Very, very riveting things. But we met there, worked together almost 2 years, and then COVID hit and we had all been sent home to be working remotely, which was a very weird concept because Blackstone was 100% 5 days a week. There was no flexibility in offices. This was pre 2820. And we went home and had this opportunity to be able to start working on things a bit outside of normal office hours because we were no longer sitting in the office from 8 to 8. We had a little bit more flexibility of being able to do some other things. And so that's when the first initial idea of Pickle came about, which was a completely different platform. We've had a pivot along the way. We actually started as a polling app. And so we were helping people crowdsource opinions to be able to decide what they were wearing, what they were buying, and they would basically poll a community of people with similar preferences, and then it would de-risk their purchase. So we were injecting social proof into that purchase process. And we worked on that for almost a year or so, saw some things that we weren't loving, like some of the retention metrics, but then had some really interesting insights into what people really liked and were using on the platform. And we saw a lot of people commenting on polls saying, you don't need to go buy this. You could actually go borrow it from me. They were recommending items from their own closets. And so then we looked at the rental space, and no one's really tackled that peer-to-peer model. There have been tons of people that have been working on the subscription model and owning that inventory. And that aha moment of all of these items exist in our closets and homes. So why aren't we circulating them or monetizing that underutilized asset? And so we pivoted into the rental marketplace in May of 2022. So now we've been working on growing and building Pickle for the past 2.5 years or so, coming up on 3. We have grown quite a bit. We now have 12 full-time employees. We have raised some institutional capital. We have a storefront in the West Village, like you mentioned, and it's been a really exciting journey.
I remember you telling me about the polling, or I don't know if it was you or Brian. What was the original impetus behind even that platform? Like, what was that moment where you guys came up with the idea and decided to get underway?
Yeah, the polling app, I think that was a big thing that Brian and I overlapped on, just struggling to make decisions on what we were buying or what we were wearing. And it's one of those things where you're going back and forth with a million group chats and with asking a million opinions or just being indecisive in that realm. And Brian and I are not fashion people, to be transparent. Everything I know about fashion, I have learned from Pickle, which I know
I
a lot
love that.
now. I know a lot now because we have a ton of data that we look at and analyze on a weekly, daily basis. And so the polling though is like, let's use social proof, which is obviously helpful to ideally de-risk a purchase. And then we thought about the path to monetization or revenue there was going to be with some affiliate models, and they'd be influential for people to purchase and for us to get a cut and potentially in the advertising area. But we had a big pivot away from that.
I have a question. So, from pivoting all the way to 12 employees and a storefront and institutional capital, that's massive growth that is rare for a lot of people. Can you tell us that's not 0 to 1, that's like 0 to 10. So, can you tell us a little bit about raising institutional capital, like all of those bits and pieces, how you decided to open a storefront, all those like nitty gritties?
Yes. Happy to dive into the nitty gritties, but if you want to interrupt it into like smaller questions, go for it because I could just talk forever.
I just threw a lot at you, sorry.
It's fine. Okay, let's start with, I guess, even thinking about institutional capital. I think for that, we knew that we wanted to be a high growth tech startup. We're building a marketplace, right? And so in order to scale and grow that, you need to be able to bring on additional resources on the developer side. And our product is really our entire business in the sense that people having amazing rental experiences and really nailing that customer journey, that's what drives all of our word of mouth and growth. And so investing in that is really important in order to grow the entire company. So we knew we were going to go and raise VC funding. We started out by doing a very small friends and family round on a safe note. And so that just kind of got us off the ground where we knew, okay, we're going to quit, leave Blackstone, a nice stable corporate job, and go into the abyss of trying to start your company.
I'm
And
going to
so
pause you really quick. For those of you who don't know what a safe note is, it is a really common tool that people raise money on. So early companies, instead of raising a priced round, is often later. A safe note is an agreement that people raise money on. Keep going. Sorry.
yes, great call out. You can look it up on Y Combinator. It's a very helpful investment vehicle for anybody at very early stage. And so we did that with friends and family, and then we set out to try to raise a pre-seed round, and we basically failed at that over and over and over again. We could not raise a pre-seed round to save our lives. And it mostly came down to a consistent conversation that we'd be having with different VC firms that were saying, you don't have enough traction yet. We need to see these numbers. And it gets into this interesting problem where you're like, but we need a little bit of capital in order to grow some of these numbers. And so that was an interesting challenge that we had, because the family and friends round brought us through the pivot and then a little bit into it, but we basically started from scratch once we pivoted over, and we'd already spent a good amount of our family and friends round. And so we're trying to go out and raise $1 million or $2 million. Everyone's saying, you don't have enough traction, you don't have the numbers yet. And so we were like, we have to make these numbers happen with no resources or money. And so it was just Brian and I really working on this from the ground up in the early days.
Are
And
either of you too technical?
so Brian is self-taught technical. He is a pickle
Wow.
engineer. He is not a software engineer by trade. And I'm a self-taught-ish designer. I picked up a little bit of those skills at Blackstone. So the early version and first versions of Pickle, even some of the code that's definitely still running today, is just from us, which was helpful to build it us too, because we could be very iterative, and it did allow us to pivot. And when we had basically shut down the first version of the app and relaunched the next version, we did all of that in-house and we could be in control of it. So then when we pivoted over, we had to basically work on it for a year while getting rejected over and over again from every VC you would talk to, until we had built up enough traction, enough monthly active users, as well as consistent month-over-month transaction and GOV growth. Those numbers then allowed us to be able to bring on institutional investors. And they were also very excited about our retention metrics. And what we look at that, it's the people that are coming back onto the platform and continuing to spend dollars. And I remember one of our investors was doing diligence, and they said, we're going to look at your net dollar retention. And we're like, great. What does that number mean? Because that's not like the type of number that you really understand to measure when you're really early stage in a consumer company, but it's a key metric for a marketplace. So anyone looking to build marketplaces, that's something that you should consistently look at, because your investors will check it out during diligence. But our numbers were great. And so they were really excited about that, because people were coming back and continuing to spend money. And so we finally convinced them to invest in us. And that was a big moment for us it was June of 2023 when we finally raised our first institutional capital. We work with Craft Ventures came in first, and then First Mark Capital also came in.
I just remembered I had a thought about the early stage stories, because when you were saying like you used up most of the capital and that transition from the polling place to the actual, closet sharing marketplace, I remember my Brian story, which was in the early days. I think he dropped off the first thing I rented from Pickle. And
yes.
I remember now my Greenwich Village apartment. I'm like, why do I remember talking to him? And that's when he literally brought me the top I rented. And then I remember talking to you, and you were saying or maybe he said this, that was a huge challenge in the beginning, was finding the couriers to actually bring the items, because you're going to physical apartments, picking up those items, or at least I know now you guys keep some of the inventory. You can talk through that, but share a bit about those early days because I think that's a lot of grit as founders.
Yes, I'd say every single thing that we did at the very beginning, early days to kickstart the marketplace was not scalable and in any form. And I would recommend starting that way because that's how you'll really learn your business inside and out. But a few examples of that. One, our entire, first set of users or lenders of people that were listing their closets were some of my girlfriends where I went to their apartments and like took things out of their closet, said, please put this on. I'm gonna take a photo of you. I'm gonna help you upload it, just like manually getting anything we could listed onto the platform. Other things, we would host these photo shoots. I say that in quotes because they were, very scrappy, where we would invite some like micro and nano influencers of New York City. And I'm talking like, let's talk 3 to 10,000 followers, like small. These are not big name creators that we now have on the marketplace, to come and meet us for a professional photo shoot in Soho, which basically consisted of me standing on the corner with green balloons so that they could find our location, and a professional photographer that I had found from like an FIT job board that would do it in exchange for like portfolio exposure. And so we would bring these influencers in, they would get a bunch of photos for their Instagram and for their pickle closets. And the idea was that would help them kickstart their first items that they'd get listed. So we'd tell them to wear their favorite outfit that they might want to have listed on the platform. We'd help onboard them that way, which honestly was a good tactic because they had beautiful photos that they wanted to share on both socials and right on their pickle closet. So those were two good examples, but the favorite is definitely how we really thought we must have door-to-door delivery because we wanted Pickle to be a true extension of your closet. So when you think about it, this fashion rental marketplace, it's only going to be super convenient and easy to use if when you're in a pickle, you can get a last minute outfit. So the idea was we cannot compromise on this. We need to be able to allow people to rent same day and get it the same day. But how are we going to do that? And the simple answer was Brian and I were the couriers for the first 7 months of working on Pickle, which is hilarious looking back. And I think we did over 4,000 subways. We fulfilled 1,500 orders and many, many miles that I should probably calculate. We were both skinnier back then is the joke that we used like to say.
A lot of being on foot for sure.
Yes, and so that's how we met you, or well, how Brian met you at your door, Bryn. And I love the full circle moments of people saying, I remember when you delivered my first pickle rental. I was like, yes.
And I remember being like, Brian, you are not the profile I expected for a, closet rental company, but he's amazing. And you guys complement each other.
Do you still deliver door to door?
We have door-to-door delivery, but it is not by any of our Pickle employees. It is all by using other delivery networks. So we tap into Uber, DoorDash, Relay, all these really great couriers that exist as a network already. They're already delivering food and other items throughout the city. And so we just have an integration with a delivery aggregator. And so we can just deploy those couriers on demand when people select their 2-hour delivery slot.
Amazing. And where are you geographically? Where are most of your users geographically?
Most of our users are in New York City. LA is our second market. So that's been a big focus of ours too. We've been working on expanding some of our markets because also to level set, Pickle is available across the country. So anybody can sign up and use the app. And if you are interested in renting something that isn't local, then you can have it shipped to you. So that's been a really helpful way that we've started to grow outside of New York because people have heard about us from social media or word of mouth or friends that live in other cities and they want to try it. And it's not impossible to use. You just use the shipping method and you just plan a little further than same day. And so, but we're very focused on the local market building because that's the magic of door-to-door delivery and rental that's happening in your neighborhood when you can have that last minute experience. And we see it happen in the data when people get to the end of the week and they're panicking for their Friday night outfit and they're ordering at 4 p.m., getting it at 5 p.m. and leaving at 6. It's an awesome experience and really magical. But New York is our number one, LA is number 2, and Miami has been growing a ton. And we're very excited about launching that market more efficiently.
Especially with their nightlife, I'm sure, you need constant outfits there.
Exactly.
Can you talk a bit about, it came to mind with scaling from micro influencers to now you have all of the big names, at least all the big names of New York and all of the girls I know on the platform. And I think you have some of their closets and I'm pretty sure maybe that's what's in store too. Can you talk about scaling that process and the social side?
Yes, scaling that process. I mean, I don't know, some people ask, how did you guys get connected with these really big name influencers? And don't think that that's where we started. We started with everybody that had a very small social platform, but people that were really, really influential in the micro scale of fashion. Those are the girls that are wearing the latest, greatest, trendiest pieces. They're setting that tone for all of New York. And we started there with the nano micro influencers. And that community is pretty tight knit. And so there started to be additional word of mouth that was happening within that group of girls, where eventually we were able to get introduced to a few macro influencers here and there. I think Audrey Trellinger was one of our first macro influencers that got on the platform, and she's tight with a lot of these girls, and they all talked about it. You know, it was not us doing a cold DM. Sure, we definitely tried doing cold DMs there, but you had to get a referral in for a lot of those people because their friends started making a ton of money on Pickle, and they started having this really great experience of not only a side hustle, but also a new engagement tool for their community. So when they post a photo on Instagram, their audience not only asks, where'd you get that, but they also will say, can you put that in your pickle closet? Which is a pretty cool circular, flywheel that we're seeing happen amongst our creators and amongst the way that they're using both their social platform and now this marketplace on the monetization side of things, which has been super cool to see. We have worked with some of them to be now featured in our West Village storefront, which has been very cool. We opened that just over a year ago, and that has been a very exciting kind of community marketing strategy for us. It's a really great place for people to be able to come in person, learn more about Pickle. It's a great billboard in the West Village. People love walking by and saying, oh, Pickle, like, what is that? Or a friend talks about it. And we're able to then work with some of those creators where they can have their items featured there to be shopped in person. The scale of it, though, the amount of inventory that's in there and the transaction volume that's done there versus just through the app, it's less than 1% of the inventory is in the store. So we have over 200,000 items on the platform that you can rent. That's just a small taste of some of the pieces that are available to rent, and is more of like it's very helpful for marketing and community and bringing people together. Yeah.
Will you add more stores then, or because it's more marketing community, it's more once a city gets to a certain threshold?
That's more the latter. I think it will be something that will likely be part of our strategy in LA and Miami. It's something that we're kind of running the numbers and looking at who we'd want to potentially feature, where it makes sense in what location or what neighborhood and everything. But it's definitely not something where we say, all right, we're deciding to launch in this market, but it hasn't really started yet. Let's open a store. You know what I mean? It would be, we had a lot of progress in New York before we opened that storefront.
Do you ever work with this is so rogue and I apologize in advance, but do you ever work with brands for, there's inventory each year that goes into the garbage. Is there a world where that becomes a part of your inventory? Or I don't know, I'm just ideating with you, an unprompted ask of, but does that make sense to you at all?
We have some brands that do have pickle closets, which is very exciting. Okay. So Cynthia Rowley has a pickle closet. So they'll feature some of their seasonal summer items as well as their snow gear. Half Days has been featuring their ski gear to rent out in snowsuits, which has been really cool. And so we started.
That's my ski gear. Half Days is great.
They're the best. They're awesome. You should rent it out. You'll make some money on those pieces.
Half Days, would you like to sponsor this episode?
We should bring them in. The founders are great, actually, if you do want to talk to them. I could intro.
Get on it.
And I should. That's a really good idea. My Half Day suit literally sits in Vermont and gets used for 3 days a season, so I should bring it home. This is my handy dandy coat closet right behind us, so I should stuff it in there and put it on Pickle.
Yeah. You should. The ski suit ROI is it's very high, and you are only wearing it usually once or twice a year, maybe. So
what's one misconception about running a startup that you wish people knew?
I think a lot of people love the idea of being a founder, and it sounds really sexy and glamorous, and I have my own company, whatever. And then just take that entire concept and just flip it 180, and that's exactly what you'll actually get. That most of what you're doing is unsexy. It is just no task too small, which we quote a lot to our employees, but that is what you are absolutely grinding. And also, one of my favorite questions that I would get at the beginning was like, oh my gosh, it must be so nice to get your own hours and set your own hours. Yeah, I now work 20 hours a day. 24/7 is what you get. So, I think there's those aspects that are misconstrued, and there are a lot of highlight reels that go out about being a founder. And that's what most of the people talk about. They talk about, the success of their milestones, or the numbers that they hit, or the growth that they're seeing on social media or on their user base, or the funding. And there's so much more before that that people don't talk about as much because it's also, there's not a great platform to do it because you're not supposed to really talk about those struggles while they're happening because you're
Yeah.
trying to convince other people to invest in your business or to become a customer. It's a very interesting like dynamic there because you're struggling. You finally hit some milestones, which is great, and you get to highlight those, but along the way, it's very tough.
So interesting because all of the founders we have interviewed have said that. So if that is not resonating with our listeners, I don't know what will, because we had on the founder of Fishwife, the canned seafood brand, Becca Milstein, and she was saying her greatest misconception is that this isn't like a short stint. This is like, you better be ready to commit like a solid 15 years. Like the fact that this is your 5th year, it's crazy how fast time flies. Like
Real
just
fast.
knowing that you're really in it and you're still, obviously you guys have scaled beautifully and there's been so many incredible milestones, but like you're still very in it, you know? It's
Oh my
not
gosh,
like
we have so much to do. This is,
yeah.
we
Yeah.
like to celebrate wins. You're supposed to do that, but it's most of the time it's back to building, it's growing and working on the business. So
Julia, what would you say has been your biggest pinch me moment so far?
there have been a few. I'd say one of them was definitely the first dollar of institutional capital that we got. And it wasn't even that it hit the bank and you see the zeros. It was just the fact that somebody that was not a family friend or us as founders believed in us enough that they wanted to give us millions of dollars. And that was crazy. It's crazy to have that kind of moment. And it also was one of those where we were back against the wall for a really, really long time where we were like, how much longer can we stretch it? Can we stretch it? Can we grow by ourselves without this capital? Because at that point we were starting to do order volume that we were like, we're not going to be able to keep up with this without raising
You
additional.
guys running around New York City and delivering.
Yeah, we were still running around. Or at that point, I think we had been able to start using the money from the rentals to go all towards couriers or whatever's happening. Because at the beginning, we also didn't charge for delivery when we were doing it. You know what I mean? A lot of unit economics changed in the business because we were just kickstarting getting rentals circulating, right? So yeah, that was a big pinch me moment. I think that was the most emotional I'd felt. It was like on Zoom and you're talking to an investor and they're like, cool, so we're gonna write this check, whatever. And it seems so casual in that moment, but on the inside I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. I can't believe somebody else believes in this the way that we do. It was great.
Can I double tap in that a little bit? And it's okay if this is too personal, but I do think that that's something. It's a question I get a lot. We have a fundraising 101 course where really early stage founders, we just talk them through like jargon, we talk them through what a pitch book should look like, all of like the different types of things. At any rate, we get the question a lot of when should I give up? Like how do I know to keep going? What are the signals? And I think that's so personal and it's a really hard question to ask, but I would love if you're open to sharing how you knew you should keep going, or if you had a hard line in the sand as to this was, if we knew if we didn't get this, that we had to stop.
I think the biggest question that we were continuously asking or looking to make sure we answered for people that were going to invest in us that ties into this question was, do you have product market fit? And that's a really hard question to answer. And I think it can be somewhat subjective, but I remember very vividly having a moment or a few different moments where, you are absolutely grinding. You've run out of money like multiple times. You keep barely keeping the lights on, whatever's going on. You're physically, mentally so exhausted, but you ask the question, would anybody care if you guys shut down tomorrow? Would anybody miss your product or service?
That's a good question.
And it doesn't really matter if it's only 100 loyal people that really, really care and that would miss your product. The answer was yes. And so that just kept me moving forward all the time. And it turned into traction. And that's also part of, it's a sticky product, right? I think answering that question is also going to tie into the numbers and the data you're pulling in. But if you say yes to that, don't give up yet. You'll be able to move forward on
I
it.
just got the chills.
I did.
That
Too. I'm like,
was a meaningful moment for me personally, even.
also, I think speaking from starting off like wedding guest season, that alone is like your whole demographic. Like if nothing else, like just renting dresses to wear to these weddings, they're so expensive and you wear them once and then you photograph in them and you don't really want to wear them again. So I was in a bind in February and a coworker lent me a dress, but every single friend was like, go to Pickle, sending me Pickle. And it was the day I was flying out. So talk about being behind my schedule with having a plan. So all that's to say, it is really becoming a staple. And there are so many people who would be lost without the app.
Thank you. I feel honored. I love hearing the anecdotes from people. That's definitely one of the best parts of hearing just customers share their stories and experiences of, we solved the problem of when they were in a pickle, or they, we've heard from people that have gotten engaged and they're in pickle dresses that they rented, and, have heard heartwarming stories where a lender, let that renter keep the dress because it was part of such a special moment in that person's life. Like things like that
Love
also, that just
that.
the community centric aspect is really cool to see.
If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice on day one, what would it be?
It would be your input directly equals your output. And I think that sets the entire tone and expectation for what it means to be a founder and to try to start a business, because you're about to go do it alone, potentially if you're a solopreneur, or you might have a co-founder, but you have barely any resources. You are your own boss. You're supposed to decide all of your priorities and figure out what you're supposed to do on a day-to-day, or what's the most important, and also decide what sacrifices you're making. And so every time you would make that sacrifice, or you would think about, is this going to move the needle, or can I push myself a little bit more to get this done faster? Every time you do that, it did result in an output. And that's the coolest part, I think, of building a company, because you don't do that. It's not directly correlated when you're at a larger corporation or a company that's not your own necessarily.
So real.
That is a great answer and very tangible. Well, it goes back to the fact that it's not glamorous, because it really is like it's 24/7, it's a full grind. And I liked the comment about like there's no hats that you're not wearing. So a big part of the Femme portfolio for me was really getting transparent with founders, because I think especially our age, everyone's like, I want to get out of my job. I hate my 9 to 5. Like I have this idea, I want to go pursue it. But to really do it with intention and know that it's not some quick undertaking that gives you a whole bunch of freedom. It's actually quite the opposite, is a reality that like is setting in for me, even with this path of creating this podcast. And it takes a lot of discipline to keep showing up and keep the pedal to the metal. So shifting over on the sustainable fashion front, I want to ask if there are any myths about sustainable fashion that you can debunk.
Yes, it's a great question. And I would like to preface by saying I am not a sustainable fashion expert. And it's something that when we talk about Pickle, we are always using the words circular. We are circulating items that exist in a community. And while we are fundamentally sustainable at our core, the best way that we are able to be sustainable is the fact that we are matching a sustainable concept with economic incentives that make sense. So you're not going to go out and necessarily, some people will because they are that passionate about sustainability. Some people might go and purchase a premium product or pay more money for something because it's sustainable, but often that is very challenging to convince a large majority of consumers to do. So the fact that we're able to provide a service and access to these items in a very affordable way allows us to really capitalize on the fact that this is circular and underlying it is sustainable. I think that kind of debunks the myth that renting is not sustainable. And maybe I'll say that just from the peer-to-peer aspect. I haven't run any analysis on the subscription models or the companies that own all of their inventory. But for us, that's the way that we think about the way that we're able to kind of combine this behavior of changing the way people are consuming. And it's very sustainable and circular, but paired with the fact that it's affordable.
I love that. Sustainable for our wallets and for tiny your closets. It's the biggest thing. I have no room in my closet to even buy things. I'm literally wearing a friend's sweater. Kayla, if you see this, I'll give you back your sweater. So that alone, like, it's just nice to know if you need something for a one-off that you're not buying something that then just sits there. And if you're going to do that, then obviously put it on Pickle. But alone, just New York City living, there's a lot going on. Same with LA. And then we just don't have the space. So it's really nice to be able to find special pieces. It's also, if you're not familiar with Pickle and you're listening, it is such an exceptional way of finding new brands that are on the pricey side. Like the first top I rented was Meow, I don't know how to pronounce it, Miaou, and it's like a $250 top that I love, but I didn't know if it was going to fit me right, and I rented it on Pickle for a Friday night, and so Brian brought me, and it worked perfectly, and it was just like such a testament to being able to venture out of the closet, the brands I know, and a fun way of trying new pieces.
Yes, it's definitely an amazing discovery tool. I mean, like I said, I'm not a fashion expert by trade. I have learned so much now. I can look on the streets and I'll know a lot of what people are wearing based on the data and what we see on Pickle, especially because we're so aligned with real-time demand. because people are renting today, so we're seeing people's active demand of what brands they're very interested in shopping right now, not just even thinking about projecting for something you're maybe investing in for the future as much. So that's been really cool to learn and see.
What are some brands and founders that you've looked up to throughout this journey?
I've definitely looked up to, the number one that comes up to me is Sarah Blakely from Spanx. She has just
Love her.
been
Love her, love her. Literally
so
commented on her Instagram
happy.
30 minutes ago. I can't even make that up.
Obsessed with her.
I would die if I got to meet her. I'd be so excited. She, early days story and being so scrappy, and they didn't even take on investors, but she just brute forced her way into getting clients. And I love that so much. It's, I think, a big aspect of, you can make it happen. And she did. And I think that's just one of the coolest things that you can do as a founder. So she's definitely somebody that I very much look up to. I think there are so many other brands that we look at, even just from an inspiration perspective of a marketplace. So when we very closely study Airbnb and Uber and Instacart and these companies that are solving a really interesting challenge of building supply and demand properly and keeping those in balance, or seeing where you need to be able to stimulate supply more or on the demand side. So we're always looking at those companies very closely. And fortunately, a lot of our investors have great marketplace expertise. Like Jeff Fleur is the founding partner of Kraft, and he led our deal. And so we work with him very closely, and he's the founder of StubHub. It's cool to work with people very directly that have this kind of marketplace experience.
Super cool. And what a special opportunity, like learning opportunity for all of you.
Absolutely.
What is next for Pickle? Anything exciting we should keep our eyes peeled to?
There will be some exciting news that you guys will hear about within the next month. So stay tuned for that. And then definitely stay tuned for the way that we're thinking about expanding and kind of announcing different launches and ways that we're activating in more local communities. Miami has been growing so organically and very quickly. And so we're going to be starting to do more things on the ground there. I'm going to be out there in the next 2 weeks. We're going to be doing some different activations leading up to Music Week.
I'm going to be out there a couple times in March. So hopefully I will be
ready. We can overlap.
Yeah.
Yes, you can try out renting in Miami, which would be so fun. You don't even have to pack.
Perfect. Because I was going to say I'm going for a bachelorette, and there's themes. Actually, another shout out to Kayla. It's Kayla's bachelorette. And there's themes for all of the days. So I will definitely be renting from.
I need to meet Kayla. Does she want another person to come? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, let's get Kayla on the podcast, and also a lookbook from Pickle for her bachelorette. We can get her a code.
She has some inspo, so I will tell her to go to Miami.
Yeah, that'd be so good.
Okay, so we like to wrap our podcast episodes with a final 5. Think of one word, a sentence. It's pretty hard to narrow down to a word, but some people are impressive. So
Allie did it real well.
Yeah, she did. Yesterday's episode was insane. Okay, so what is something that you can't live without?
My twin sister.
Amazing answer. I wish I had a sister, better yet a twin. Is she New York based?
No, she lives in Philly, so
okay.
She's a doctor. Our paths have very much diverged.
Wow, your parents must just be so proud.
Bryn, hopefully I am as close to a sister in a way. I'm like, hello.
Has been for years, but I would really just love a biological sister who has known me, for all 27 of my years.
When they have a lot of years ahead of us, God willing. So hopefully at 50, your first 27 years will seem, minuscule. Julia, what is something that keeps you grounded?
Moving my body or working out.
I feel ya. Who do you admire most?
My parents and my grandparents. They've instilled all of the values, both ethically, morally, and just work ethic wise too.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I mean, obviously you have to have an incredible work ethic to do what you're doing. So clearly it's paying off.
What makes you feel wealthy?
I'd say just moments and memories with friends and family. I was on a ski trip with my family the other week, and I remember the bliss and the gratefulness that I was feeling. I was like, this is what it feels like to be rich. And I'm not, for the record, but that's what it feels like.
That's awesome.
I just wrote a whole post about that. I feel you deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And like being able to prioritize that time, as you've spoken about, like your time is so finite, and it's probably hard to like actually unplug and relax, and days are very stressful. So to be able to prioritize that, I'm always really grateful. My dad is, both my parents are crazy hardworking, but my dad's so good about when he makes it on trips, like actually being present on the trips. And I really commend him because I know that is challenging to do. And when you're leading the charge, it's like hard to step away. So I appreciate that you value that so much. What is something that few people know about you?
This is so random, but I was born in Oklahoma City, and people are like, that's so random. Like, I grew up in Maryland, but that's where I was
What's the
born.
context?
2 years. My dad, who's also a doctor, he did his med school and residency through the Air Force. And so he was
Cool.
stationed down there, and that's where my sister and I were born, and our younger brother. And then we all moved to Maryland. So I don't really know that much about Oklahoma. But that's where I was born.
It's a great random fact. Love it.
And I have one more question for you that just came to mind. What is the
I did
most,
this yesterday too.
they happen every time.
I'm dead.
What is the most interesting, fun, exciting thing that you have specifically rented from Pickle? Or like a moment you've been in a bind and you've gone to Pickle?
Oh my gosh. So, well, first of all, I will have an event or an occasion and I am renting like that same day. And it's getting to me like, 30 minutes before I need to go get on the train or something like that. So I use it very, very last minute. I also have closets now that I shop very locally. Like I know there's a few closets that are a building away from me that I think of as like, that's my own closet too, because it's, you know what I mean? It's so accessible because it's like on the same exact street that I live. So that's been really cool. I think one of my favorite things I've rented was for our holiday party. I rented this stunning red Cult Gaia dress that I saw photos in the listing where J Lo wore it, and I was like, "This is so cool!" And it was very fashion forward for me. It was out of my comfort zone, but a really cool way to try, a nice brand and really funky dress. And so I think that's probably my favorite one that I've done.
This has been so fun.
Because it is fun and funky to get to try things that you don't have to commit to buying.
Exactly.
Julia, thank you so much. This
Yeah,
was
thank you so
really
much.
refreshing, so insightful. I think what you're doing is truly phenomenal. It's definitely changing lives and saving lives for the female community in New York specifically is what I can attest to, but I'm excited about all the expansion and excited to see what comes out later this month.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely chatting with you guys.
Thank you. See you all next week.
Bye.